I'll do that too.
Setting up your meeting for Facebook Live. Here we go. It needed to be punched again. Let's see.
We are now live.
Are we live? Done. Redirecting Facebook. Can you see us?
Yes.
All right, we are live.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Like I said before we go live. Correct, Christy?
Yes, we are live. Hello.
Wonderful. Hello, I'm Thomas Hampson. Welcome to our first broadcast, our first podcast of the new partnership between the Hampson Foundation and the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And you will see in the left-hand corner, Dr. Mark Clague, who is our partner in crime there. I'm trying to get back to the Zoom. The Zoom window came up front. Anyway, Mark, welcome. And Susan Key, there you are, Mark. Right. Hello. We have just started this wonderful collaboration and partnership, which is about education. It's about knowing our culture. It's about knowing the stories of I don't know how many lives in how many cultures, especially, however, this project, the Song of America project, and our collaboration with the University of Michigan is about our story. It's about democracy. It's about the democratic story of being an American for the last 200 and I don't know how many years. Because if we don't know who we are, how can we possibly represent who we are to other people? How can we possibly work out the lively and, as we have just now and are now experiencing, very, very volatile and unfortunately volatile. I'm trying to be discreet. Clearly, the level of hate has come up higher than it has been for some time. My point, the first thing I think of is education. Second thing I think of is voting. And the third thing I think is how can we help? And that's what we're here tonight. Mark.
Well, it's just so exciting to start this new partnership and to welcome the Hampson Foundation and Thomas Hampson to the University of Michigan family. Thomas will be a distinguished visiting artist with our faculty in the voice department going forward. And Christy Finn, who's in the background here managing all of our technical needs, will be a research administrator to really help move this partnership forward. And it really has three aspects: performance at the highest level, research at the deepest level, and then community engagement. And so we're going to do all three of those things here today to talk about really I think what motivates all of us who are on this call is that music means something to us. It means something more than entertainment. It really means who we are as people and how we relate to each other. And we want to just explore the power of art to help us make our world better. And I think we have some great examples of that today. Maybe we should go around the room and introduce everybody.
Susan's been a longtime partner of the Hampson Foundation in the various symposia that we've done over the years, teaching and well, we literally teach, but we're also helping teachers of various disciplines to teach their disciplines, social studies, history, politics, economics, with poetry and song. And that's been a really fantastically interesting and challenging subject. And that is one of the most exciting things about this partnership, because the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance is, I believe, rated #1 music school in the country. That's not why we teamed up, but why we teamed up is because of the enormous enlightened belief in the humanities tapestry in all disciplines. And this mandate comes from the office of the president down to the deans of the various schools. And to find a home for my passion of the last 10 years, that it's literally plug and play for the University of Michigan, but think of all this resources, of the tremendous research facilities, as well as the unbelievable faculty in all the disciplines, much less the School of Music. I don't know about you, Susan, but I feel a little bit like, as they say, kid in a candy store. I'm very, very excited about how this can bloom.
Absolutely. And I just, as someone who's worked as a musicologist, but who has more recently, the last 15 or 20 years, I've moved over into a field that we didn't have a name for 20 years ago, but now we call it public musicology. And it is, I met you, Thomas, when I was working at the San Francisco Symphony in that capacity. And it is the idea of taking the riches of academia and finding ways to disseminate and to deepen the engagement, public engagement, school engagement. And so I'm delighted to be on this call because I consider everyone on this call a colleague in public musicology. And I really look forward to seeing how the art of democracy develops.
And before we kick into the art of democracy, I think we're also, and I know you two gentlemen are sitting there very patiently waiting, your time is coming. And the light is going to come in, and we're going to hear the genius and experience it. Fantastic. But, you know, there's something this whole project and our partnership has been building and brewing and forming itself. And we've worked together a lot over the last several months, that we're launching now at this particular volatile but hopefully tipping point of our society in America is a coincidence but a blessing. Not only that, but because of the virus, you know, a lot of schools are simply, I mean, including Cambridge, if you can imagine, simply announced there will be no physical public classes until the beginning of 2021, which means we've all been catapulted into the public as well, into completely recognition and use and belief and trust in the digital world. And our job is to take that digital mandate, it seems to me, both in the performing world as well as the educational world, and build a third rail, which is analog and digital at the same time. And so there's, you know, we're talking very fast, we're moving fast this evening, because it's not theoretical, it's not hypothetical, it's not ivory tower stuff. It is the art of democracy. It is, well, Mark, you tell us, tell me about the civic responsibility. Tell me about art of democracy. I love that phrase. You gave it to us. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a bit of an inspiration when we were talking, but I think, you know, one of the interesting things about, you know, the linguistics around democracy, you know, which goes back to Greek times, but it, you know, we think of it as a noun, but it's really a verb. And I think about art in the same way. You know, we can think about art as a thing on the wall, a painting we look at, like the Jasper Johns behind you, Thomas, but also we can think of it as a verb, as something we do. And song is a similar thing. I mean, song, we can have it on a piece of paper and look at it as a composition, but song doesn't take life. It doesn't until we literally breathe into it, right? Until we create a moment of focus, and it's a focus for the performer and the listener, and it creates a moment of sociality, a moment of communion between sort of art and individuals. And I think that's what we're really looking about, is the art of democracy. I mean, it's very much a play on words, because as we know, democracy is hard, right? It's not something you can just sort of do. There's no recipe for it. It takes compromise. It takes sort of the art of persuasion. It takes, you know, all sorts of arts to bring people together to make the community more than the sum of the individuals. And art itself is also a way to give voice, right? To provide an opportunity for composers to take words and then to amplify them into our world, to be heard and listened to in a way that won't happen in casual moments. I mean, it's been interesting. I've been on some of these Zoom concerts, and of course, we're all online, just as you had said, but there's something about being with a group of people, even virtually, that intensifies my focus. I listen more when I'm with people. It changes the experience. And it's the same thing with democracy, right? We need to be together. You know, it's for the people, by the people, to form a more perfect union. All of these words in our ideals and our founding documents, we need to live those, and art helps us live that world.
You know, when I think of democracy, and we all love to quote our founding fathers and get a little bit higher on our box and talk about this, but it is something that I don't hear discussed as much as I think it should be, and that is that education, meaning the informing of an electorate, so that their decisions, ergo their right, their responsibility of voting, would come from the most informed basis, and everyone had a right to it. In other words, education is a civil right. It's not a privilege. It is a civil right. In fact, it is a civil right both of the government that you live under, or the society you live in, as well as the individual living in that society, the right and responsibility to participate. But how should we participate if we're not given the tools to make those decisions, which in the arts is literally the experience of empathy, understanding other people's paths, and that you know, every time I talk like this, I just go immediately to that wonderful Maya Angelou quote, where she just in her wonderful way said, you know, ladies and gentlemen, we are more alike than we are unlike.
You know, Thomas,
yes, this is what we do. Please.
I think I think you're so right to talk about empathy. And then I also want to emphasize that the arts are a way of engaging students intellectually as well as emotionally. And I think one of the things that we need to do is help students understand that they are actors in a large historical pageant, and that this conversation that they are very aware of today dates back 200 and whatever many years to our very founding. And the more they know and the more they can enter intellectually and with empathy, the better citizens they will be.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a great example of this in the music.
3 questions, and then we're going to move.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mark, what? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, I just wanted to say we have some amazing music to hear, but let's transition.
Let me just throw out these 3 postulations that we all thought about and put up to talk about, because we want to get to the evidence of them. It is, how did and do works of art directly participate in social and political discourse, especially social change in American democracy? Not just change as in past tense, but change as in very necessary. How does art offer a safe space and an unsafe space to explore social, political topics that otherwise are too polarizing to address? And third, what role have the arts played, or do the arts play today, in the lives of diverse Americans? And can their social and political views change as a result of engaging with the art itself? We tried to postulate 3 different ways to look at the same issue, and that's why we invited one of the most extraordinary musical experiments I've had in recent history. And Joel Thompson and Eugene Rogers, thank you very much for joining us. Mark, they're your colleagues from the University of Michigan. I hand it over to you.
Well, Eugene Rogers is our Director of Choral Activities here at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And Joel Thompson is a composer who's been a collaborator with the university. He's doing a doctorate, I believe, at Yale currently. So it's great to have you both here. And they're talking about really an amazing piece of music called The 7 Last Words of the Unarmed. And this is a piece that was premiered by the University of Michigan Glee Club, Men's Glee Club, just a couple years back. And Dr. Rogers was the director of this ensemble at this time, although he's moved on to a position as our choral director for all of our choirs now. But Eugene, can you take it away and tell us a little bit about this piece and introduce Joel? And then we're going to hear an excerpt, I think, from the piece.
Wow, so much to say. Thank you for having me and us. You know, Joel is an amazing human being. When I think of you, I think you talked about giving voice. And to me, The 7 Last Words is a work that gives voice to the voiceless. You know, it's a reflection of life. Absolutely. The American story, you know, the full American story is not comfortable if we really think about it. And so, you know, why should art, song, and music maintain what I consider sort of a one-sided or false narrative of that story? And to me, The 7 Last Words is an absolute reflection of that. Joel and I don't want to speak for him, so I'll just say we met in 2015 and went on this journey together. And so, Joel, I'm going to let you speak, and we'll sort of tag team a bit on this conversation. So, Joel Thompson, brilliant composer.
Thank you, Eugene. I'm not sure if we want to hear an excerpt first, but I will say that I wrote it in the winter of 2014 into 2015, and it was in response to the death of Eric Garner. And it was just a way for me to process my grief and anger and pain in response to that, and trying to really provide a moment of catharsis for myself. And then I'll talk a little bit about it, I guess, after the excerpt.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you. One for sake. Let's all go to some music. Christy's doing our presentation behind the scenes. Please, let's have a listen. I'm not hearing anything. Is anybody else?
No.
Not yet.
Christy, on the screen sharing, did you push those two little buttons? Here we go. Before you share that, there we are.
Wow, it's just amazing.
You know, when I think of this piece in 2015 and you ask about safe or unsafe space, it definitely, no one felt safe in any shape or in any form performing this work. You know, my goal was to create a safe space for students to have a place where they could enter into the dialogue. And thus, even at that time, Black Lives Matter was not a hashtag or theme that we even used. But we use love, life, and loss. It's interesting now, we would have no issue saying this is a Black Lives Matter work, but to think about how the challenge for everyone on some level to enter in and begin this conversation. And so I can't thank Joel enough for being brave enough to allow us the opportunity to go on that journey with him. So I don't want to keep talking. I want to allow Joel to speak.
When was this premiered? You wrote it in 14-15 and you premiered it in 15?
We premiered it fall, November of 2015.
And what has been the journey of the piece since then? And what is the journey now?
Joel?
Well, Eugene actually championed the piece for quite a while, took it on tour with the Men's Glee Club and really tried to encourage other ensembles to perform the work. It was a little slow at first because it seemed it's unfortunately a reality in a lot of classical music that as a Black man stating my truth, it's sort of inherently political and at worst polemical to some people. And so there was a little bit of resistance, but as it became more apparent that our silence was leading to proliferation of the exact things that I was writing about, more ensembles, particularly gay men's ensembles, started stepping up and performing it across the country. And nowadays, the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra performed it last year, and that was the first major American orchestra to take on the work. And other ensembles are reaching out and hopefully going to program it in upcoming seasons.
You know, there was another famous white composer who was accused of being too political, and he said, "The hell with you all," and he changed the titles of his symphonies. Somebody, Beethoven or Beethoven, I don't know. He's dead now, so it doesn't really matter. He's got no rights, but apparently he was also considered inappropriately political. So I don't know. Do what you can there. I mean, how unbelievably ridiculous can that get? Never mind. Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen,
part of our
there is a whole YouTube. We're going to listen to the excerpt and talk some more about it. But I cannot beg you enough to go listen to this piece of music, and also to the accompanying websites with the program notes and the discussions and different questions and answers, the background of the pieces. You guys have done a wonderful and incredibly important service. And especially now, I can't imagine the resonance that the hurt that is going on in our country right now cannot have some expression to by learning and learning of this piece and listening to it. Should we listen a little bit more? We have another the very dramatic movement I think we're going to listen to.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So powerful and such a resonance with George Floyd's, murder just last week. So it's, I wonder, can you talk a little bit about the performers? I mean, I wonder, it must have been a transformative experience for them to perform this piece. Just the notion of breathing and singing Can't Breathe, and the finality and tension and dissonance in those chords. I don't know, Joel or Eugene.
Yeah, the Glee Club is not full of, as you can see, mostly non-African American young men, and not mostly music majors, but I was impressed with, hopefully throughout the whole process, of trying to allow them to not think of it as a political piece at the time. Again, in 2015, that was sort of a tightrope, with fine line there, but thinking of it more about the commonality of humanity. That loss, regardless of how it is something that we all can relate to. And so I think those students, as they started learning more about the stories, being allowed to enter in their own way, I think many of them went on as much of a journey as I did, realizing that this piece yes, it's political, but it doesn't have to only be thought of it as political. So find a piece of art music that represents each words differently, and we can connect as human beings, that human story. That movement is very difficult to sing because Joel doesn't give you much time to really breathe, and it's very dissonant and piercing. And so the singers connected to it, obviously, in a very musical, real way, those words. But it's a little scary to me to think of those words, same words 5 years later. It just shows that how far we have come and how far we haven't. So Joel, I don't know if you want to.
And it's very incredibly, as a performance, it's unbelievably powerful that they're all off book. And it's just, a bunch of wonderful young men singing these very, very powerful words in an emotional and musical context that will move anyone that has to listen to it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Joel. I don't know what you're working on now, but Godspeed, and I hope we hear it soon. And right. And if anything comes up for solo baritone, give me a call.
Okay, will do.
I'm begging in front of I don't know how many hundreds of people. I mean, it's just a wonderful piece, and you evidence and answer if that's what we're looking for in our three postulations to begin with, how powerful, how relevant, and how necessary can the artistic experience be to galvanizing the relevant real-time, real-life experience in any generation. Jump, who's in there? Who? I thought I heard somebody speak.
No,
something.
we were agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Mark, where are we going from here?
Well, we wanted to sort of connect this piece to, I would say, a foundational piece of America's music history, the national anthem, and the way in which it's connected with issues.
It's going to be like a cold rag of water right across your face.
Yeah, so we're going back. So as we know, the Star-Spangled Banner, the song, was written in 1814 based on a melody from England from the 1770s. But this is a different text, one that I wish every American will know. And I think Susan and her education colleagues will help us get this out to the world. But this is a text called "Oh Say Do You Hear?" And it's probably the most powerful set of words I know that are written to the melody that most Americans would recognize as a Star-Spangled Banner. But it turns out the Star-Spangled Banner isn't exactly what we think about, or it's deeper and broader and more complicated than we think about. So this is a performance we did at the University of Michigan. This is a baritone who is doing a doctorate, Jean-Bernard Serin. He's actually from Haiti, he now teaches at Lincoln University in Philadelphia. And I just want to, let's just let the music speak and listen to these words.
Shall we ne'er day when freemen shall stand, and millions who groan under matchless oppression, shall liberty shout in our rescued land, ne'er shed by a slave in our blood guilty nation. Oh, let us be just, and God we dare trust, that the day will overtake us when perish we must. And our star-spangled banner at half-mast shall wave o'er the deathbed of freedom, the home of the slave.
Wow.
So not the words you expect.
No, you probably would get less response from some people from my community if they heard those words.
So these words are actually from the 1840s, and they were first published in an abolitionist newspaper, actually in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I am right now in the university and where Eugene is now. It was called "Oh Say Do You Hear?" And it's a set of like different lyrics to the Star-Spangled Banner. They were quickly reprinted in William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator and became nationally known. But it's specifically, if you can see from this original printing, displayed as a new version of the national song, the Star-Spangled Banner. And the interesting thing about it is that it's about figuring out what America is and what its values are. So there's obviously this incredible irony today still between a nation, you know, the land of the free and the home of the brave, a land of the free at a time when 4 million humans were held captive in slavery, right? The irony of our founding documents in this text and this melody speaks to who we need to be as Americans. Thomas?
So many thoughts come to mind. I would just say that it's curious that already in the 1840s that there was a known text and a known understanding of the power of this piece that could be ironically juxtaposed with a different text, different rhymes, so that somebody would take that sort of in even 1840, as early as 1840. How many, you know, how long ago was that? Took this journey with somebody who felt good about the song and good about the text and went, oh, wait a minute, somebody else has written something quite different to that. I think this whole idea, and this is, I remember when you first showed this to me in one of the first meetings when we got together and worked, and we were preparing for the Star-Spangled Banner celebration 100 year or 200 years in 2014. And you were showing me all these texts, and I was completely nonplussed by the fact that there were so many of these so-called broadsheets that just kept writing on the back of a melody, so that you didn't have to worry about creating the song. It was just a known vehicle for different aspects of every generation. I mean, this went on. Our national anthem didn't become a national anthem until the 1930s, and that's after quite a very prestigious group of people had a big think tank about it, and we don't need to go into that. But the point is that this civic, progressive, proactive iteration is, to me, what the Star-Spangled Banner has become in its, what I think of it as a genesis. I remember you showed me these texts when we did the concert, and I had to sing this text, and the rehearsal, I just broke down. I just couldn't sing it. There's several other, we looked at different verses, and I've been doing now this Song of America project, and actually sing 3 or 4 different versions quickly sometimes, just to give people the idea that this active artistic effort is part of the democratic tapestry that any country, but especially our country, has been born of. And yes, sometimes it's aggressive, sometimes it's louder than others. It is by no means a Hallmark card. It is no means a feel-good moment. It is there to inform. It is there to empathize. It is there to galvanize a sense of community, regardless of the backgrounds, races, cultures, influences, economic disparities. This is what just grabs me by the throat with this thing. I'm sorry, I'm ranting. Here I go off again. Anybody else want to jump in and say that's a bunch of nonsense? Or agree? Susan.
Thomas, yeah, I just want to, this is something we chatted about before. I don't know of another country or another anthem that is so fluid and expressive of where we are at any particular moment as this one. It's over 200 years old, and yet it continues to live, both in different words being written. And in the 20th century, the methods of performance, I think of Jose Feliciano in San Francisco. I think of obviously a lot of different voices doing different interpretations that are far, far from the kind of standard. And then, of course, gestures such as Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the national anthem, which is our next slide. In fact,
Christy, if you want to advance that. There we go.
Yeah, and continues to be a source of, so this one piece functions at once as a national emblem and as a vehicle by which we express, articulate, and argue about ourselves and our democracy.
I think that was beautifully said, Susan. I mean, and part of my point is that, the notion of using the Star-Spangled Banner for protest shouldn't be controversial. It actually was something that's throughout its history, right? So Kaepernick's kneeling and drawing attention to this irony about freedom in a world that isn't free, and that the nation isn't living up to its ideals is exactly how this song has functioned in American history. And I've found over, at this point, 200 sets of lyrics that have been sung to the tune we know as the Star-Spangled Banner throughout American history. And what's fascinating, and this is to Thomas's point, Francis Scott Key's lyric is about number 80 in that list, right? So he didn't start this. He joined a conversation about the nation that includes campaign songs for Thomas Jefferson, songs about John Adams, songs about the 4th of July. And this was a tradition, the next slide here, called broadside balladry. And we see like the town crier in the square in the upper right there. But all of these texts that you see are actually different words written to the melody we know as the Star-Spangled Banner, the song we know as the Star-Spangled Banner. And this is a lyrical conversation. And so this art of citizenship is a process, right? It's an art of negotiation, but it's individuals imagining new words to this tune as a way of debating, just as Susan said, what this country is all about.
And Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about how these were spread? Because I think this is also something that might talk to our historical moment and to students and their experience with social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So all of these images on this slide are from newspapers. And so, I mean, in some ways, this is the sort of original social viral marketing. I mean, you basically wrote these lyrics, you had them published in the newspaper, and that's what Francis Scott Key's The Star-Spangled Banner was first published in. And it literally went viral because one way that every town had its own newspaper in the 19th century, and part of the way you got content was that the newspaper owner would subscribe to the newspaper of the neighboring counties, and then they would look for good things and they would then reprint them. And so if you can think of this as a kind of Instagram photo of a set of lyrics or an idea that gets posted and liked and reposted and shared, that's how these songs, sort of embedded their way. And it's a sort of a freak accident that Francis Scott Key's text is one we still remember, but this was a common way of having discourse. And I think what's important about it and what's important about the art of song, and we see the slide here from, the sort of the moment of creation, Francis Scott Key watching the bombardment of Baltimore. And he writes about what he experienced and conveys not only the ideas, the event, but how it felt. What is the emotional impact of this? And that I think what is so amazing about that text, "Oh say do you hear?" I mean, when we hear, instead of the home of the brave, we hear the home of the slave, and that kind of final chord, I mean, it punches you in the chest in a way that just drives home that emotional message. And Joel's piece similarly, right? I can't breathe, and the incredible dissonance and the tension within that, and hearing, the piano, the crushing chords, to me, that's the same thing. It adds a human empathy, a human depth to the words that drives it into our heart in a way that gives us the chance to be more human.
It's looking at this plate, it dawns on me how often we sort of over romanticize and stereotype a particular event. In fact, Scott Key was looking through a portal that was barred. He was essentially being held captive on a British frigate, and had essentially collapsed from exhaustion. Woke up in the morning and barely dared himself to look out this portal to see if, in fact, the McHenry fight had gone the wrong way. Which, if it had gone the wrong way, we'd all be speaking with a completely different accent. And saw a very wilted, beleaguered, shot up, but still hanging banner. And out of that emotional moment came the need to tell that story. And I want to fast forward or expand the whole thing to what my thesis for several years and the whole Song of America project been about, that our stories, our songs, in whatever context they're written, but in my bailiwick of classical music, poetry and music, this articulating it's of a particular time in our history. To look for our Beethoven, our Schubert, our Brahms, our Debussy is a complete and utter waste of time. It is unbelievable, as Susan said at the beginning, how much energy of our democratic process, of our becoming America, has been invested in the creative process of saying what it means to be an American. And on top of that, the classical composers have almost through our history spent as much time writing about what it's like to be a composer born in another country, come to America, maybe or maybe not becoming a citizen, most of them certainly, but nevertheless, this idea that the American passion that drove them to say what it meant to be like alive then, as Copeland said, was this driving force of the articulation of the democratic union, this progressive civic act. It's just an amazing evidence of patriotism, and that's what our creative arts and sciences and our arts and letters in our country impresses me, is this amazing diary of all the contradictions and warts and hates and loves and euphorias and successes and missuccess. If we know these stories, we can't help but be more patient and understanding one another. We don't have to agree, but we sure as hell don't have to shoot each other.
Well, since we have a composer on the call, I'd like to, Joel, just invite you to talk about this. I mean, what is it like to try to translate the moment into song?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Yes, that's something I'm constantly thinking about, especially in my compositions after Seven Last Words of the Unarmed. When I was writing Seven Last Words of the Unarmed, I really didn't own the title or, ascribe the title of composer to myself. I was a choral conductor at the time. And I think I wrote Seven Last Words not thinking that there would be a performance. And that led to a particular level of vulnerability and honesty about my own feelings, not prioritizing white comfort at all. It's really just dark, all the darkness of my emotions without any balance of light. And it was really just a diary entry, as you mentioned, just for me. And a part of the scary thing when Eugene decided he would program it is, you know, this is so raw, so vulnerable. Will the typical classical music audience be able to not put up defensive walls and be able to actually listen to what the piece is trying to say? And in a brilliant stroke of programming, he paired it with other pieces before and after that really made the message of the piece pop that much to the fore. And so it's that level of honesty. And now that, you know, people are asking me to write things, I won't ever have that space again where I'm not thinking about an audience. And that, I think that's part of why my piece is powerful. The piece, Seven Last Words of the Unarmed, has had such a powerful response. And it's still to this day difficult for me to listen to because it's as if someone is reading my diary entry out loud on stage. And all of the emotions that you can imagine with that event still happen to this day. And yeah, I'm very grateful to Eugene, though, for, even though it is very charged, that he still thought it worth sharing.
Joel, this is Susan, and I wanted to ask you whether you had talked to groups of young people, or I just feel like your message of being able to give voice to something where you felt vulnerable is something that so many of our students, and especially students of color, can relate to in this day and age. And the idea that you pushed through that and that you succeeded at this level, I think would be very moving and wonderful for students to hear and possibly inspire them toward their own creative expression.
Yes, it's very important to me. I'm very glad to hear that education is such a passion, a shared passion among all of us. And I want to be able to be in a position where I can encourage, especially young musicians who look like me, to know that classical music can be a space in which your voice is heard. It's a little difficult when, you know, schools are struggling with how to make spaces that will allow us to be able to bring our full selves as Black musicians into the space in which we've been historically marginalized. And so I want to be a part of the change that I'm seeking, for sure. Yeah.
Wonderful.
It is so incredibly important that we find ways to bring music and poetry, the artistic process, back into the schools, since there seems to be this still prevailing punditry of elimination of the humanities, the elimination of music processes, the elimination, you know, the RRs or whatever, you know, this whole STEM argument, which I don't even, I just think STEM was an idea because somebody forgot STEAM. You know? It's such a no-brainer to me. It's like, oh yeah, of course it should be STEAM. My bad. You know, I don't know why it became this craziness. And you know, and today, now as we're talking about reopening the economies across the world and whatever all that means, and I'm not making light of the tragedy by any means of the virus, but I mean, there's a re-exploration of what is essential to people in any society. And that's going to be focused on first. And who's talking about arts and sciences, much less liberal arts education and so forth, and much less music in the schools, much less how many underprivileged schools across the country of any color are going to ever have the opportunity to hear a piece of music like this, much less so many other pieces of music. Yes, Gene, I can see it jumping in your mind.
Yeah, well, I do want to say one of the things that I'm most proud of are the educational resources that we have available. The University Law School, Margot Schlenger, and the School of Education with Darren Stockdale and I, the three of us, really came together to make sure that it wasn't I mean, it's a brilliant composition on its own, but to have this work in addition to these materials, I just think I'm so happy to hear that education is a part of this organization, because that, to me, this work, not only we can deal with the specific incidents, but really the collective history of pain of African Americans. I think this work can allow people to enter into that conversation. Change will not happen if we don't have white allies speaking and doing the work with African Americans. We need everybody together having this conversation, and hopefully these materials will allow for people to begin that conversation.
I find it very interesting to juxtapose the experience of the Star-Spangled Banner, the progressive civic activity, with a contemporary evidence of that as well, because as someone very presciently and tragically said, a political historian that I'll remain nameless, it's not that American democracy has failed, it's that it's such a disappointment because of how great it could be. This is our mandate in every generation. We're better than this. And education is without question the basis of it, and music education and poetry education. You agree, Mr. Colleague, Mr. Clague? By
Absolutely.
the way, educational materials, I mean, this whole Star-Spangled Banner project was huge, and you're now finishing your book?
I am, yes, I'm supposedly on sabbatical, even though I'm basically trying to figure out what to do about COVID. But Susan and I have been, working on the Star-Spangled Banner together for a while. We actually created a foundation called the Star-Spangled Music Foundation and did an NEH workshop, in part to get all of these materials out to kids. And I think if every K-12 student knew both the Francis Scott Key text and the E.A. Atlee abolitionist text, that would destabilize the whole notion that somehow the Star-Spangled Banner is this unmutable, unchangeable view of our country, that in fact our country is always in motion, and part of what being a democracy is singing the future into existence at all times. And so we've made a lot of...
But what are some of the big button social issues that found themselves singing to our national anthem melody?
Yeah, so there's a lot about equal rights, women's rights. There's a lot about unions. There's a lot about, there's certainly a lot of patriotic stuff. There are campaign songs from Abraham Lincoln, and really almost every presidential candidate. So it was considered a sort of urgent way to talk about what the country needed.
And I'm going to just put a quick plug in. I don't know if you can see it in front of my backdrop. I'm holding up the Star-Spangled Songbook. I don't think it's because I'm the backdrop. Any teacher who would like a resource, Mark and his editor, Andy Kuster, put together a songbook of many of these. Can't remember how many versions are in the songbook.
80 versions in there. Yeah.
80 versions and set to music. There's also a CD and accompanying CD, Poets and Patriots. So there are resources. And I think when we worked with teachers at an NEH Institute in not the Bay Area, I'm in the Bay Area, in the DC area in 2014, I think that as I think about the main reaction of the teachers we worked with, it was, I had no idea of the history, the messy history, the long history, the way this song was used. So I think that, if we can all keep working at this good work of getting these materials in people's hands, they are illuminating and they are life-changing and mind-changing.
Yeah, I think it's that complexity of the story that I find so fascinating. Yes. I mean, I started out teaching this material in a class on American music, and I was looking for a piece to really talk about what is American music. And I would always start out with Jimi Hendrix, playing at Woodstock. And because that is, an amazing musical version. And to me, still one of the most powerful versions. But the reason it's so powerful is it's so complicated. I mean, it's not just raw patriotism. I mean, it's in the middle of Woodstock, a countercultural, sort of protest, and it's the Vietnam War. And then on one hand you say, well, here's this black man who's just sort of arguing and saying the country's bad. No, this is a guy who was in the 101st Airborne. This is a guy who had friends in Vietnam, right? This is a guy who actually was sort of ardently anti-communist and was really struggling, I think, with his own Americanness. I mean, he had had, come up and playing in sort of blues and jump bands in the United States. And it wasn't until he found his musical voice when he went to England. And I think in a way he was looking back over the Atlantic at his country, suffering and struggling and not knowing what to do. And he puts that into this sort of obsessive performance of the Star-Spangled Banner that he did like 60, 70 times. We think of Woodstock as a singular ecstatic moment. In fact, it was a process of him figuring out who he was as an American and trying to convince his fans that this country was sort of worth saving. So there's something about this that's inherently patriotic. It's inherently a call to action. It's both patriotic and a critique and a protest at the same time. And that's what's amazing. And maybe we can just listen to a little bit of it. Well, it says it all, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what's amazing about that to me is that he's singing with his guitar. I mean, when people heard it first, they heard all those extra notes and all the violence that was in those improvisations, and they thought, oh, well, it's a burning of the American flag. It's not. It's an illustration of the American flag. In the sense that it's the words "bombs bursting in air" and "rockets spread glare" that get those big improvisations, and those, to my ears anyway, knowing that this is in the context of the sort of racial tension of the 60s, of Martin Luther King's assassination, of the Vietnam War. These are depictions of sort of Vietnam and the streets of America, not unlike the streets of America right now in protest, still demanding, equal rights for everyone. So, and, calling, sort of saying Black Lives Matter, it's really very much a part of that rendition. And so for me, it's honoring the flag at the same time that it's honoring the sacrifice. I mean, that the interpolation of taps, which is the Civil War eulogy, that comes in just before that final phrase, about the land of the free and the home of the brave. I mean, and you can see Hendrix tuning throughout that performance. He wanted to get all the notes right. He wanted it to all sound beautiful. At the same time, he wanted to call attention to the real tension and the problems in the country, and that his fans at Woodstock, I mean, he saw Woodstock as a moment of triumph. I mean, here were all these people. It was a free festival. It was a safe festival. This was a time for youth to sort of take over and remake the nation. And I just think it's an amazing performance as an illustration of the art of democracy.
To paraphrase other people's statements of late, it feels like an anthem that is saying, let me breathe. And there's so much pain and so much anger in the middle bits, and yet the theme keeps coming back. To me, I haven't listened to this for some time. It impresses, like you said, Mark, it impresses me as a tremendously devoted attempt to say something about being American. It's a back in the day, one of the first times they'd get your damn knee off my neck. Let me breathe. We still do it.
We have to make sure this is not just a moment that we're going through right now.
Thank you, Eugene.
I hope this is really about true change in our country, in our world. So that's my prayer, really.
It should be all of our prayer. And by the way, thank you for joining us on this project. That's one of the most important things that Marcus said as well. These things are not monuments. We don't romanticize them, put it on them. The monument is not a statue. This is the evidence. And art is an active transcender, an active participant in creating what we call artifacts. It's funny that people get so hung up on the word of art as if it's elitist, and yet we use artifacts as a statement of facts and an evidence of something quite freely. And it just feels to me like what we're talking about are the artifacts, are the evidences of those things already thought out. And why don't we listen?
Why don't we listen? That's a beautiful way to sum up this conversation.
Yeah, we need to listen.
I tell you what, Joel, as much as you just keep writing, because I promise you, we will all be listening. Wonderful, yes. Wonderful.
Thank you.
It's been a wonderful hour. We promised to keep it in an hour. We're going to keep it in an hour. It's been a wonderful visit. Does anybody have anything else to add other than a resounding amen? I wish I could invite you for a glass of beer or something, but digitally we haven't figured that out yet.
When you're in Ann Arbor, I'll take you up on that beer.
And I will be there as soon as we can. Christy, I'm afraid you stayed behind the scenes. Come on out, darling. Put the screen away and show yourself again. And please, yes, there you are. Hello, Christy.
Hey.
Tell everybody where would you go to find everything they want to find.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share with everyone just all of our online resources. So this is Eugene and Joel's fantastic collection here of recordings and information about Joel's piece, as well as educational resources and resources for U.S. policing and reforms. So I would really encourage everyone to check that out. And then the website for Mark and Susan's foundation, Star-Spangled Music Foundation, has loads of educational materials for teachers about the Star-Spangled Banner, and we've just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg today with how far you can explore. Right, Mark?
One thing I'd like to say is just yesterday, in response to George Floyd's and in honor of his funeral, we posted a free edition of Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is now available for anyone to download. And that sheet music for that is tricky to find, at least in my experience. So we want to make that available to everyone.
Great.
We will share that link specifically, Mark, on our Hampsong Foundation Facebook, so everyone can find that. And then our Hampsong Foundation website, which is the Song of America database, which catalogs hundreds of American composers and poets and writers, and thousands of American songs. So you can go and explore about historical composers as well as contemporary composers. So Joel, we need to get you on there as soon as possible if you have some more songs too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to explore here as well. There's educational resources for teachers too. So.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. And this is this week's, we're going to do this month 3 webinars, or whatever we call podcast. I guess I guess it's a webinar. It's a meeting of minds. Next week we will be on the 18th. Is that correct, Christy?
Yep, 1 week from today.
And our center of gravity, our orbit will be next week about what?
That will be about the songs of African American composers with Louise Talkin from our colleague from the University of Michigan, fantastic soprano and scholar, and Bill Banfield from Berkeley, who's also a fantastic scholar and composer himself. And then we will have potentially a few special guests stopping by to talk about their works. So we're very excited about that.
The African American canon of classical music is one of the most fascinating evidences of creativity in our country. Mm-hmm. With all of its very, very obscene and troubling past. And but just simply to take that journey is just one of the most illuminating and gratifying pleasures you can have as an awakened American. So I really, the Hampsong Foundation is very devoted to expanding our silo of that activity. Hopefully we'll have somebody come from the African American Song Alliance who we support in everything we can possibly do. It is a wonderful subject. It's not just about music made by Black folks. It is about America, and it is about the creativity of America. And yes, a lot of it was ignored inappropriately for so long, and wonderful, wonderful stories. Anyway, more of that next week. Do we dare announce the 4th of July? Well, stay tuned. We've got plans for the 4th of July. We're just going to surprise you on that one, yes, but we're going to have some fun with this. Anyway, everybody, thank you so, so much. Mark, my dear colleague and partner in crime. Susan, you're amazing. Christy, none of this would happen without you. Joel, I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to get to know you. And Eugene, you and I have got work to do, son. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for having us with us tonight.
Thank you.
Anyway, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Great conversation.
And be music. Bye-bye.